In 1732, George Washington was born into a world where slavery was common. Washington's views on slavery evolved over the course of his life. This is the story of his evolution and of the enslaved people whose fates were intertwined with his own. In the 18th century, the Atlantic world depended on slavery. Ships crossed the ocean carrying raw materials from the Americas, manufactured goods from Europe, and captured people from Africa. Over more than 3 centuries, at least 10 million Africans were taken from their homes by slave traders and shipped to North and South America. They were considered property and had no legal rights. In Virginia, plantation owners purchased enslaved people to grow tobacco and other cash crops. Slaves became the colony's main source of labor. At age 11, George Washington inherited 10 enslaved people from his father. To grow his estate at Mount Vernon, he bought and rented slaves to work in his fields and household. When Washington married wealthy widow Martha Dandridge Custis, she brought to the marriage more than 80 slaves from the estate of her first husband. At the end of Washington's life, there were 317 enslaved people living at Mount Vernon. They served as everything from housemaids and seamstresses to blacksmiths and distillers, but most worked in the fields on the plantation's 4 outlying farms. Those enslaved at Mount Vernon had little control over their fate, yet in the face of their bondage, they carved out lives for themselves. Their story is not only one of hardship, but of strength, resilience, and survival. Agricultural workers like Priscilla labored from sunrise to sunset in the fields. At night, she returned to her one-room dwelling where she did her own housework and cared for her 6 children. She did this without her husband Joe, who was assigned to work on Mansion House Farm several miles away. Frank Lee served as the mansion's butler, and his brother William Lee was George Washington's personal manservant. Frank's wife Lucy was the cook, a job she had learned from her mother Doll. Skilled craftsmen like Isaac, the chief carpenter, made tools and supplies for the plantation. Isaac's wife Kitty and other spinners and seamstresses created textiles to make enslaved people's coarse clothing. Enslaved laborers were under the daily command of Washington's overseers. Some were enslaved like Davy Gray, but most overseers were hired white men. They carried out Washington's orders, supervised work, and distributed food and clothing. Overseers also delivered punishment to those who disobeyed. One overseer whipped Charlotte, a housemaid, for talking back to him. He said he was determined to lower her spirit or skin her back. After Tom, a field worker, tried to run away, Washington sold him to the West Indies. The threat of punishment was ever present. With few resources, enslaved people found creative ways to make better lives for themselves and their families. They kept gardens and raised chickens to supplement their rations and sell to earn money. Sambo Anderson kept bees and sold gallons of honey to Washington. Kate, a field worker, asked Washington if she could be the midwife for the estate's enslaved women. Caesar had no opportunity to receive a formal education, but he learned to read and write and served as minister to the local black community. Some were able to escape their captivity. Only Judge ran away from the president's house in Philadelphia, and Hercules from Mount Vernon. Over the course of his life, Washington came to question the economic and moral cost of slavery. He told friends that he believed the country should gradually abolish slavery, and he explored ways to stop using enslaved labor at Mount Vernon.
I have more working Negroes than can be employed to any advantage in the farming system. To sell the overplus, I cannot, because I am principled against this kind of traffic in the human species. They could not be disposed of in families to any advantage, and to disperse the families, I have an aversion. What then is to be done? Something must, or I shall be ruined.
Washington kept his beliefs out of the public view, concerned that fierce debates over slavery would divide the young nation. Ultimately, his most visible rejection of slavery came after his death, when he used his will to free the slaves that he owned outright. He was the only founding father to free his slaves in his will. Sadly, this act freed fewer than half of those at Mount Vernon. Neither Washington nor his wife had legal authority to emancipate the people held by the Custis estate. They remained in bondage and were inherited by Martha Washington's grandchildren. Many families were separated. There are no written records from Mount Vernon's enslaved people themselves, but through Washington's letters, accounts, and ledgers, he unknowingly wrote their biographies. Archaeology provides a glimpse of their private lives, and oral histories with their descendants reveal details passed down through generations. By piecing together this evidence, we can explore the stories of the enslaved people whose lives were intertwined with Washington's. We invite you to learn about their contributions to Mount Vernon, understand the hardships they faced, and honor their strength, courage, and spirit.